Jimmy brings with him the latest news from the Middle East with perhaps, in my opinion, the most unique blend of political, biblical, and prophetic insight that can be found in the media today. He's met and interviewed many of the international leaders, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, Ehud Olmert, the Israeli President Shimon Peres, and a host of others. Jimmy's seen on the Day of Discovery television program, which is produced in the Middle East, heard on weekly and daily radio internet programs, and some networks, over 1,500 stations. An author, a speaker, recent book, bestseller, Ready to Rebuild, a documentary on the rebuilding of the Third Temple. And Jimmy continues to monitor the most current events as they unfold in the Middle East and compares these current events through the lens of a biblical worldview, which is a refreshing view. Jimmy, thank you for being with us today on the Conservative Commando radio show.
It's great to be along with you guys.
Well, we've done a lot of discussion here on this program. We've talked about with a lot of guests to a number of issues of the Middle East. We've concentrated on Syria. We've talked on Iran. We've talked about the Brotherhood. We've talked about this whole swirling thing that's happening in the Middle East. But I want to ask you, because you are an expert and you do bring a perspective that's a little bit different than many. We are caught up, it seems, here with talking a lot about Obamacare and what that's doing here within our nation. But at the same time, things are continuing to boil, it seems, in the Middle East. The Obama-Iranian deal and the incessant threats of Iran to wipe Israel off the map seem to me all are working together to isolate Israel. And it appears, in my opinion, that tensions are building and something's about to blow. Now, you've spent lots of time there. You are a most recognized Middle East journalist. So from your perspective, Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, I'd like to ask you, do you agree that something's about to happen in the Middle East that's more than just the normal, and if so, what?
Yes, indeed. Something indeed is about to happen. And I do believe that the Obama administration is playing a key role in making that come about. When you talk about the Iranian deal that was made at the conference there in Geneva, you had the P5, those would be the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the United States, Great Britain, France, China, and Russia, plus then one, and that would be Germany. When they sat down at the table, Catherine Ashton, who was the chief of foreign policy for the European Union, was the moderator, and when they talked with the Iranian representatives, and they came to a deal which President Obama is claiming to be a great historic deal that has come to pass as a relationship of these men and women talking together there in Geneva. I can tell you Prime Minister Netanyahu said it's the greatest historic mistake in all of the world making this kind of decision. Only that which could even compare to it would be when Chamberlain came back out of Germany and said the world is at peace, and then we all know what happened after that. So Prime Minister Netanyahu has told me in the past personally that the greatest threat to the Jewish people would be the Iranian situation and their development of a nuclear weapon of mass destruction. And every day, even prior to the second session there in Geneva, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, now he is the real power in Iran. We have the face for the Iranian leadership, which is the smiley face of the new president, Rouhani. But he is not true leader. He had to be selected, first of all, to even run for president, remember, by the Ayatollah. So he had to be favored by the Ayatollah to even have a chance to run for president. He replaced Ahmadinejad, who was the most radical president that Iran has had in recent years, the last 8 years. And Rouhani was the man who put the program together to develop a nuclear weapon of mass destruction. And part of that program was negotiate, delay, and then continue to advance towards our nuclear weapon of mass destruction.
Well, and obviously that is happening. I want to ask you a question here. What is it that caused these nations of Europe and the United States, and maybe the reason's different for all of them, but does this represent something that has fundamentally changed on the foundation-wise? I mean, is there a hostility and an anger towards Israel that is developing, or is it just because there's some profit that they can see in opening up trade relations with Iran? I mean, what's driving what they just did, which is historic? I agree, it's historic.
The almighty dollar bill is driving it, Sam. I tell you, that has to be the case. Because, look, what part of this deal was to loosen up on some of the sanctions, pull back from the strict sanctions, allow Iran to start the sale of oil, allow them to have further control of their banks. Now, their profits and their monies have been frozen all across the world in the banks that the Iranians have some of the revenue in, but they have opened up. I'm looking at a website page right now, and here's the headline. Iran aims to regain global role at OPEC meeting. Well, hello, Iran is the number 2 producer of petroleum products, at least before the sanctions, second only to Saudi Arabia, and now they're going to come back to power in the OPEC, making billions of dollars. They were able to be released from about a $10 billion sanction that was on them, a financial economic sanction. So their marketplace is going to go wild. You've got the European Union entrepreneurs rushing as quickly as they possibly can into Tehran. You have that same thing happening out of the United States of America. You have the president who is being driven supposedly by the Wall Street gurus, who he always is attacking, but playing a key role with them, to helping them to revive the economic situation. And that's all unfolding right now because these sanctions have been released when the Iranians simply said, okay, we'll stop enriching the uranium. We'll only enrich it to 5%. Hello, that's just a hop, skip, and a jump to having weapons-grade uranium to put together a nuclear weapon of mass destruction. A report coming out of the intelligence community in Israel, it would take 36 days once they have come to a location where they can start enriching all of this uranium, 36 days to have a weapon as a warhead on a Shahab missile that can hit any target in Israel. And that is because of their economic...
That brings me up, Jimmy, to this question here then. Netanyahu then, when he said about the deal that it was a disaster, he was exactly correct because of that. Now, he has drawn a line in the sand. He has made statements that if they got too close, Iran got too close, that Israel would have to do something. Now, I personally like his courage, and I like what he says, but I'm finding that it appears that former Prime Minister Olmert seems to be one of Netanyahu's strongest opponents, calling his actions dangerous, even accusing Netanyahu of making Obama the enemy rather than Iran. Now, which one of these are speaking for the people of Israel, or if that's even a right question? I mean, what's happening there in that regard? Who's speaking?
Well, it's certainly not the former Prime Minister Olmert. I've had conversations. I interviewed him several times as well, once when he was mayor of Jerusalem and then when he was Prime Minister as well. And Olmert is the laughingstock of the nation of Israel. He is a corrupt man, one of the most corrupt men in all the history of Israel. And he's, I think, just trying to revive his prestige among the Jewish people. But I can tell you that Prime Minister Netanyahu has the backing of the people of the state of Israel. The reason is they believe that this deal that was made in Geneva endangers them. And the body politic of Israel is very much concerned about what could happen. Iran is their number one threat. It's a matter of life and death. It's not a political, diplomatic situation, a matter of life and death. And you've got to remember, Israel is the only nation in the world that a leader of another nation has said, we're going to wipe you off the face of the earth, and we can do it in 90 seconds, and you're going to be annihilated. And by the way, that was just before they went back to the table in Geneva.
Is Israel prepared to go it alone, and what will it take to trigger? How long can they wait when Iran is clearly marching forward down that path to nuclear capability?
Sam, the answer to your first question, yes, indeed, they can go it alone. They have the greatest air force in all of the world. So there's no problem as far as that's concerned. For the last 6 months, they've been in a training process, refueling in the air so they can make all the way to Iran and have their strike and then return back to Israel, similar to what they did in Iraq many years ago in the 80s. But now they're not going to have to go it alone. The United States is probably not going to play a role. Benjamin Netanyahu said, we'll do it because we have to do it. But he's been in conversation, not him actually, but some of his intelligence community have been meeting with the Saudi Arabians, and they're as concerned about this as Israel. In fact, Saudi Arabia has already made contact with Pakistan. The Pakistanis are the only Islamic nation in the world that have nuclear weapons right now. And Saudi Arabia helped finance the development of those nuclear weapons in Pakistan. Thus, there's an obligation for the Pakistanis to reciprocate and give the Saudi Arabians a weapon. They have two possibilities. They'll either get the weapons, these weapons of mass destruction, put them on their own property. Remember, Saudi Arabia is just across the Persian Gulf from Iran. They're the closest nation in the Middle East as far as the Iranians are concerned. And then so they could have their weapons on their own real estate. Or they could say to the Pakistanis, hey, we'll send our technicians in. We'll have the weapons there in Pakistan. You can fire the weapons from there. So those are the options. And now the Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, is meeting with some of the leaders in Saudi Arabia, even some of them speaking out and saying, we're going to collaborate with Israel. We'll give them the right to fly through our airspace, and that's a shorter trip over to Iran to take care of it. And if the United States is not going to help, they can just, and I'm not going to tell you what they said after that, but anyway, they're going to be able to stand with Israel. This is a Duke's Mixer funny thing, how politics makes strange bedfellows. The only thing they're going to cooperate with Israel on is the destruction of a nuclear weapon of mass destruction as far as Iran is concerned. So they're ready to go. They can go at any minute. And the deadline, the red line, according to Netanyahu, again, in my conversation, last one I had with him, the red line is, if my intelligence community tells me that Iran has a nuclear weapon, then they can mount as a warhead on a Shahab missile to hit any place in our nation. If they tell me that, we are going immediately, no hesitation. We don't care who's with us, if nobody's with us.
So, frankly, based on that, and you think that he will actually follow through, that's the kind of thing that could happen tomorrow. It could happen a month from now, but it's certainly not a year from now.
It's certainly not a year from now, because at the end of this 6-month period, and that again is the second segment of this deal that was made, there's a 6-month trial period, which the two parties, the Westerners and the Iranians, are to get together and work out the details. Of course, the devil is in the details. I got to tell you, why in the world would the Iranians come back to the table? I mean, these sanctions are the ones what has forced the Iranians to the table. You release all those sanctions, you give the right to the Iranian government to develop a nuclear weapon. That's what's happened. This agreement guarantees that Iran has the right now. That's never going to turn back. They have the right to develop a nuclear weapon of mass destruction, and President Obama can call that part of his legacy if he'd like to do that. That's crazy. Anyway, they're not going to turn back. So in the next 6 months, something has to happen. There's a report that said in 36 days that they could have that weapon of mass destruction. Israel has to deal with that, and in fact, as I've continually said, it's a matter of life and death. They're going to deal with it. They'll do it by themselves, and Netanyahu, he does not mix words when he's talking about dealing. This is the most important thing. The Obama administration, in fact, the president himself told Netanyahu to shut up, quit talking about this. We got to work the deal out. Netanyahu returned his comment by saying, nobody's going to tell me to shut up. I'm going to protect my people. That's my most important responsibility, and Iran's not going to attack on my watch.
Well, I tell you, he sets an example for a lot to follow. Dr. DeYoung, we have just about a minute and a half, and I wanted to get at least one comment here from you on the Temple Mount. I've been watching articles, and I'm finding that the Jewish folks are wanting to pray there, and some of the leaders there of the Temple Mount are saying if they do anything more, the world's going to come to an end. How much of a ticking time bomb do we see there on the Temple Mount and the whole temple issue?
That's probably the toughest time bomb that is available for the world at this point in time. I have an article on my website, prophecytoday.com, in my news column on the home page, which talks about the Muslim world very much concerned. You're right. There are negotiations going on now in the Knesset, the Israeli legislative body, to be able to have the Jews give access to them to go on the Temple Mount, separate up there between the Muslims and the Jews, allow them both to pray on the Temple Mount. The Islamic world says that's not going to happen. We will go to war. Now, that's a threat they're going to have to back up as well. But the Jewish people, and I know every single player preparing to build that next temple, every one of them that are involved in going up onto the Temple Mount right now, challenging the control by the Islamic world, and they say, we're not going to back off. If we have to die, we're going up there. That's the most holy site in Judaism. That's what God has given us. We're going to have a temple up there. Messiah will rule and reign from there. And I got to tell you, Sam, everything is prepared for the next temple to be built, and it can be built within 6 months. It is a hot spot. Zechariah the prophet said in Zechariah chapter 12 and verse 2, it'd be the center of controversy in the last days. We're at that time in history.
We are at that point. And Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, I'm going to have you back on that issue alone on the Temple Mount and just really how close. We're going to have to cut away here right now and finish, but I want to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners where to go to find out more about you and the things that you're talking about.
prophecytoday.com, prophecytoday, prophecytoday.com would be the location. It gives all the information about our ministry, our materials they can purchase from our bookstore. And by the way, I'm going to be leaving right here and going to John Ankerberg's home. We're going to have a meeting tonight, pre-production meeting for some television programs we're doing. I did Day of Discovery for 18 years, and we're doing John Ankerberg. We meet tonight. We'll be talking about these same subjects. Sam, you're right on time with what you're talking about.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, thank you for being with us today on the Conservative Command Radio Show. We will have you back.
Thank you so much.